What's up, Duke fans? Welcome to another great episode of Duke Blue Central. Why is it great? It's great because Duke just played their most complete game of the year against the Pitt Panthers, stomping them 75-53. Was never close, was never in question. This Duke team operated like a machine tonight and played like a national championship contender. It was on from the word go against Pitt. Duke was not there to have any funny business, was not there to let Pitt hang around and make shots from the jump. This was Duke's best game of the year. I'm just going to launch into it today. I'm recording this right after the game. Here on Tuesday night. Happy to be coming at you right after the game. But let's go in with the good. And obviously, you know, when we break down every good, we're breaking down basically the player of the game, who played the best. And, you can't start anywhere but Kyle Filipowski in this game. Just one of his best games in a Duke jersey ever. An insane stat line. 11 for 12 on his total field goals. He missed one shot the entire game. 4 for 4 from 3, 10 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 block, and finished with 26 points on the night without shooting a free throw. These were all earned, made shots. None of these were, hey, let's just hack them and send them to the line. He didn't even shoot a free throw tonight and still was able to get 26. An insane performance from Flip. And he had a great defensive night, too. He did finish with 5 turnovers on the night. Plenty of those occurred when the game was already over, which this game was pretty much over after 10-15 minutes, but just a crazy game from Kyle Filipowski. I hope that this is him kind of revving up to his true form. His last 2 games, he had scored less than 10 points in both of those games. Duke was obviously still able to win those games, but to get where we want to go, which is Final Four national championship, contend for the ACC title, tournament, and regular season. We need this Kyle Filipowski. This guy played with his hair on fire tonight, couldn't miss anything, was getting to his spots, was demanding the ball, was being assertive. Everything everyone has said Flip needs to do, he did tonight. He played like Duke's star. He played like a guy who's going to get drafted in the lottery of the NBA next year. And this needs to be his mentality going forward. I think he could have had a game not as good, but similar to this last game. He just missed some shots he would normally make. But tonight, all of those shots fell. And we also saw a little bit, I noticed too, especially in the beginning of the game, Pitt was actually not doubling Flip like we've seen pretty much every other team do this season. Almost every game we play, Flip is getting doubles in the post from the tip, and Pitt actually let that not happen, which I've seen some people actually recommend when you're playing against Duke because they don't think Flip has played as well this season. And let me tell you, leaving Flip on one guy was not the move, and it is not the move because he ate steadily down there. One-on-one with him in the post, I felt like he was scoring every time. And if not scoring, he was kicking out to a three-pointer, which tonight chances were those were going in, which is something we'll talk about later in the episode. But just a crazy game from Flip. I mean, what else can you say? Almost perfect shooting performance. Hard to break down how good he played in this game. He finished with only 1 foul, which is something we've also talked about with Flip, is picking up bad fouls. Finished with 1 foul tonight. Even with playing a lot of minutes, everything was right for him. I don't know what else to say about Kyle Filipowski, but if he keeps playing like this, he's going to be in the conversation for National Player of the Year and should definitely be in the conversation for ACC Player of the Year. So many of those awards get so political in nature where, you're looking for the best story. You might just pick the best player on the best team, which who knows could end up being Duke by the end of the year. So you never really know what voters are going to have in mind when they're voting for those. But especially ACC Player of the Year, Flip kind of coming into his own and getting into form. If he does that, I think he can lock up that award, hopefully. RJ Davis has slowed down a little bit in previous games. who I actually predicted R.J. Davis to win Player of the Year, I think last week or so, just with the way he had been playing and the kind of lack of other scoring options on Carolina, whereas Duke's got a lot more. But if Flip is putting up numbers anywhere near this, he's going to lock down that award. So awesome night from Flip. Best player on the best team in the league, I think, and he showed it tonight. Nothing else to say on him. I might come back to him later, but for now, nothing else to say on him. I also just wrote down, only other scorer with 10-plus points was Jared McCain, which is kind of surprising. Duke only finished with 75 in the game. We scored 48 in the first half, then scored 27 in the second, but we were rolling out bench players. Sean Stewart and TJ Power were getting minutes with just under 10 minutes to go, I believe, and played the rest of the way. The game was in hand from 15 minutes in. This was a game that if Duke wanted to, it felt like they could have maybe scratched 100 or at least gotten close to it, certainly in the 90s. But they put the brakes on a little, just slowed the game down, tried to get out of there healthy, which is good. You don't feel like you have to just totally just destroy a team like you did in the first half. When you're up 48-23 at halftime, you can put on the cruise control a little, and I don't mind that much. But for a game in which Duke's offense was clicking as much as it did, you would expect a lot of guys to be above double digits. The only other one was McCain, who had a good game, 2 for 5 on his threes, 5 for 9 overall. Also finished with 5 rebounds, 4 defensive, 1 offensive rebound, 2 assists. McCain had a good night. He continues his kind of a rise into this team. He's been the freshman, I think, that has impressed the most, as most people probably would have predicted. No shade at Caleb Foster, by the way. He had a good night tonight as well. But McCain's shooting prowess has really lit this team up, and just it's his threat of making a shot on the perimeter is so great and is so valuable to this team. I don't think it can be understated. He's moving up into that. If we didn't want a guy to go down, is he number 3 on this team? I would say everybody would say Flip is number 1. You don't want to lose. If you were picking a player you had to drop for one game, obviously you don't want to lose Flip first. After that, there's been some debate. I think at the beginning of the year, people would have told you Proctor, but I think as we've grown, it's probably Roach right now, at least, that's playing the most consistent from our guards, and he's been the best guard on this team this season. So I think you'd say him, and then after that, man, do you say McCain? Do you not want to go without him right now over Proctor? I don't know. No shade on either of those guys. Love the way both of them play, and Proctor's obviously working his way back from injury. But man, just the threat of having I don't know what McCain's 3-point shooting numbers are on the year right now. He's shooting 45% total field goal percentage, but I think he's approaching a 45% from 3. It's something or I've got 43%. Yeah, 43.8% from 3 for Jared McCain on the season so far. When you've got a guy that can shoot it that well, and it feels like when he's open, it's above 50%. What that does for an offense can't be overstated. And McCain's brought that, and he brought it tonight. But other than that, let me just read you the point totals. Mark Mitchell finished with 4. Caleb Foster finished with 8. Looked like he was going to get more. He hit 2 threes pretty quickly in the first half. Once again, we've talked about it before on the show. Foster's really like a streaky guy. He'll get hot and score 6 in a row, 7 in a row, and then it's like you won't see him take a shot the rest of the game. Interesting development with him, but kind of similar story tonight. Finished with 8, shot 3 for 6, so 50%. You'll take that. 2 for 3 on his 3-point attempts. So a good game for Foster with 8 points. McCain had 12, like we just said. Roach finished with 9, went 1 for 4 from 3. So that's even he won't be happy with his 3-point shot tonight. Still finished with 9 points. And then you move on. Ryan Young had a good game tonight. Finished perfect from the field, 3 for 3. Good for Ryan Young. Had some good defensive moments. Good moments out there on the court for Ryan Young. 5 rebounds, 2 blocks for him tonight. Then we had Tyrese Proctor, only had 3, which we'll talk about him a little bit later too. And then TJ Power came in, hit a three, great three by the way, step back in garbage time, and Sean Stewart also grabbed himself 4 points while he was out there when the game was well in hand. Jalen Blakes was the only other guy that played for Duke, finished with no points. Almost had a really nice breakaway dunk, but he got stuffed by the rim and fouled, and looked like he got a pretty nice cut on his hand. He had to go back in the locker room for, but he came into the game later, so we're not too worried about Blake's being down for any amount of time. But good performance from him. He's in there to create chaos and wreak havoc on the defensive end, and he does that pretty much every time he's in. But yeah, I just wanted to point out that pretty balanced scoring other than Flip just dominating on the scoreboard, which is a good thing, I think, for a team. It just shows that, and one of the things I mentioned in the preseason episode of this of the podcast was that for Duke to lose games, I think we have to have a lot of guys combine for a really bad night. And I think a great example of that is this game, in a game in which, Flip obviously does Kyle Filipowski things. He's scoring 26, but everyone else, you're pretty balanced. So even if one of those guys has an off night tonight, we're not losing this game, certainly, and we're probably only not winning it by as many. Now, in our losses so far, we have had guys had combined bad nights, and I think Flip was kind of still working his way up to playing speed. I wonder how much of his injury has it sounds like his injury hasn't really affected his season at all, but you got to wonder, just being out for almost the entire summer right into the end. He was only cleared for basketball activities pretty late, right before the season started. He was still with the team working out and everything, but he was only practicing actually 5-on-5 and things like that pretty late into the offseason. So you wonder if now he's really kind of getting back into his groove where he was at the end of last season. Who knows? Maybe he just had a good night tonight and the injury's not a thing for him at all. But I hope for all of us that this is him kind of revving up the engine, and this is going to be the new standard for him. And if he plays like this every game, we'll never lose a game ever again. So, yeah, another compliment for Flip there. But I also want to shout out the coaching and the preparation for this game. I thought we so well dismantled Pitt's game plan, which is to shoot a lot of threes. They're a decent three-point shooting team. I think they're maybe middle of the road percentage-wise in the ACC, but part of that is because they shoot so many. They shoot a ton of threes. Their game plan is to hit more threes than you every game, and they try to do that every game. And I think Duke really defended well against that game plan, especially in the first half when the game actually mattered. They were running guys off the three-point line like nobody's business. And if you watch the game tonight, I think the only critique you would have had really early before Duke ran away with it was that in particular, Federico was getting a lot of offensive rebounds and kind of giving Pitt more possessions than they deserved. But part of that was by design, because so many of the Duke defenders were on the perimeter running guys off the line. We knew we weren't going to have a huge advantage down low. It was basically going to be one-on-one for for the boards. But we're okay with certain guys getting rebounds in certain positions rather than letting Pitt just shoot threes over us, over kind of lowered hands all game. So that was part of a scheme thing, and I wasn't worried about that at all. We ended up crushing Pitt on the boards, 42-26 rebounding, which is just, I don't know that I would have bet us crushing a team like that on the boards all season, let alone like a decent ACC opponent. I mean, Pitt's got 10 wins on the year, 10-6, I think, after tonight's game. And we just crushed them on the boards, even while – now, here's a good stat for you. Would you have bet that Pitt actually shot the ball more times than Duke tonight? Duke was 29 for 56. Pitt was 19 for 58. Now, part of that was because Duke was hitting 51% of their shots, so we didn't get a lot of second chance, necessarily get a lot. We had 13 offensive rebounds, but we didn't necessarily need a lot of second chance opportunities to get extra shots because the first shot was going in. But even while Pitt out shooting us, we just crushed them on the boards, which is an interesting thing when everybody preseason was worried about rebounding. And I tried to tell you at the beginning of the year, it wasn't going to be a big a deal. people thought. And another great point, too, that actually Jim Boeheim, who was calling the game tonight, I don't know, I think this was the first game I've heard Boeheim call a Duke game. I'm not sure. I might be missing on that, but this is the first one I remember. But they actually asked him about kind of the big question for Duke going into the year. One of them was that without a Mark Williams or a Derek Lively type presence in the post, how is Duke going to be defensively? And Boeheim finally said something that I feel like several people have been talking about forever with Duke, is that you don't necessarily need that type of defensive player in the paint all the time, because what ended up happening the last 2 years for Duke, I think, is because we had such an eraser in the paint with Mark Williams and Derek Lively that we knew we could get beat on the perimeter defensively, and he was just going to clean it up for us. And we almost fed into that, I think, a little, where guys would kind of cheat off their man a little bit more because they knew, okay, he's going to drive, I'll get a little contact on him, and then Derek Lively will come up behind me, swat his shot, and we'll be on offense again. But when you don't have that, you're forced to defend perimeter. You're forced to defend the perimeter with more intensity, more ferocity. And Duke has done that so far this season really well. And we knew Duke's guards could defend pretty well, especially Proctor. And the effort from the other guards, Roach is a little undersized, but the effort he has, the defensive game from McCain and Foster has been better than I thought. We're just not getting beat on the perimeter in the first place, so we don't need necessarily that guy in the paint swatting every shot that comes in. Now, obviously, those guys are special, and you'd love to have them. But another thing is, too, Flip is averaging 2 blocks a game this season, and ranks nationally as one of the better interior paint defenders. For as much flack as people give him on defense, he's a great defender. Now, look, he's not going to be special Mark Williams just swatting everything to the ceiling, but I'll tell you another thing, Mark Williams and Derek Lively are never going to beat Kyle Filipowski on offense, making 4 threes a game and getting deep in the bag with the post moves. So Flip's caught a lot of flack kind of preseason before we even played a game about his defense, and he's showing up, and I think we as a team are showing why you don't necessarily need this big guy that's one of the best shot blocker in the nation in the paint all the time, because we're so good defensively outside of that. So that wraps up the good for this game, which is pretty much most of my analytical prowess here. There's not a lot of bad to talk about. I almost have basically nothing to say about the bad. I think some people would maybe say Tyrese Proctor didn't have like an excellent game. He only finished with 3 points, kind of his he's streaking a little on games where he doesn't score a lot. He hit 1 3, which was a big 3 when the game still mattered, when it was still kind of in the balance for like 5 minutes. So good shot there. I think he finished, a 1 for 6 total. So he missed some shots, but he also finished with 6 rebounds and 5 assists and was great defensively. So I wouldn't even call that a bad game when the rest of your teammates are clicking and you're rebounding the ball as a guard that well and dishing the ball that well. And some of his assists were just crazy. Go watch the highlights of that, by the way. I would not say at all Proctor had a bad game. I think the scoring is still coming, and I think part of that is that he didn't start this game again, which I had actually said I hoped that he would start. But with the way we played, it's hard to argue with any decision the coaching staff made today. But I think Shire is clearly trying to get Tyrese back integrated into the squad. But it's important for him that Duke plays the way we played without him rather than how we were playing at the beginning of the year. Duke has had their best wins. The most important game of the year, I think, to this point is that win against Baylor, and that was the game without Proctor on the court. And I think the other guards and the rest of the team found a rhythm and a chemistry while he was out. I wasn't saying Proctor was doing anything negative when he was on the floor, but it's just a chemistry thing. It's a feel thing. It's how you pass the ball around the court. It's what guys like certain spots. I think Shire is clearly trying to keep the momentum of how we were playing without Tyrese Proctor while slowly integrating Proctor's game back into that style. So it's kind of a reverse of what you'd think at the beginning of the year. I would think, we're integrating these freshmen into Proctor and Flip's system. Now it's kind of been on the other foot where we're now integrating Proctor back into what is now becoming Duke's system this season. But I have faith Tyrese is going to be better. I mean, like, if he hits a couple more shots tonight, we're talking about him having one of the better games of his season. If he makes 2 more of those threes he hit, he finishes with 9 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. He just missed some shots. I have full faith in Tyrese, not worried about him at all. And still, he's just such a he does so many other things on the court that you just can't have him sitting on the bench for that long. I guess some people could say Mark didn't have his greatest game after setting back-to-back career highs. He finished 3 rebounds, 4 points. But part of that is, just everyone else was just so on fire. Mark did finish 1 for 4. He missed some shots, but you're not going to cut the guy that much after the 2 games that he's had, and just how everybody was shooting. The game just wasn't flowing for him to get a lot of opportunity. So nobody had a bad game tonight. This was a great all-around performance for Duke. That kind of wraps up my coverage of that game. Just the most complete game of the year against a decent Pitt team. They've dropped a couple games here lately, dropped one to Carolina, but this is not going to be I'm not predicting this team to be bottom of the barrel ACC team. I actually think they'll finish above the middle of the ACC, and we just dismantled them at their place too. Next up on the schedule is Saturday, big one, Georgia Tech, revenge game against Georgia Tech. We need to smash Georgia Tech on Saturday, because I think if we show up and just swamp them by 20, our loss to them on the road, I think it will look slightly worse because we redeemed it just a couple weeks later, and we're able to just crush them at home. So that's an important one for Duke, I think, for the resume standpoint, is getting back at a team that beat you early in the year. And hopefully, by the end of the year, when the committee's looking at Duke's resume of where to put them in the NCAA tournament, they'll see that loss against Georgia Tech and then just think, but a couple weeks later, they just kicked their butt in Cameron and then just took off from there. We got Georgia Tech. And then we see this Pitt team again after a little bit of a break. So it won't be long before we're breaking down another Duke-Pitt game. And this time, they have to come to our place and play. Hard to picture that game is going to go any better than this one. I would actually be more prepared for Pitt to show up and just hit a bunch of threes at Cameron. I'm calling it right now. That's what's going to happen. I think Duke will beat Pitt again. Pitt will show up in the first half and go like 5 for 5 from 3 to start the game, and they'll feel like they're in it. So that's kind of all I have to say today. What a great day. Great day to be a Duke fan. Duke is now, I think this is our 6th or 7th game in a row, 7th win in a row. We're picking up strides here. We're playing like the team we were supposed to be preseason. And, you look up and although we have 3 losses, it's like it felt like the sky was falling there, Arkansas and Georgia Tech. And now we've really righted the ship. I mean, it's just we're playing well. Notre Dame last week was a close game that we didn't have a great performance, but other than that, they've played well. They've played like Duke. We've got games against Georgia Tech coming up, and then Pitt. Then we play Louisville, and then we enter. I think what the starting on January 27th, what the toughest 3-game stretch of the season looks like for Duke, which is play versus Clemson at Cameron on January the 27th. And 2 days later, we go to Blacksburg to play Virginia Tech. I know Virginia Tech's not like an incredible team this season, but if you're a Duke fan and you've been a fan for a while, you know how tough it is to play at Virginia Tech. That's a tough one. And then, to make matters even harder, just a few days later, we go at Chapel Hill to play right now a number 7th ranked Carolina team. And obviously that's going to be a big one. That Virginia Tech game has trap game written all over it, especially coming after a Clemson game against a Clemson team that looks really good to start the year, and then right before an intense rivalry game against Carolina. I'm very worried about that in-between game. I'd actually be less worried if Duke lost that game to Clemson, because then I feel like they really need to rebound. But especially Duke picks up a big win against Clemson. 2 days later, you got to go into that crowd. Man, that's a tough one. But anyway, that's all I have to say right now. Let's tackle Georgia Tech next, get that revenge game, and we'll break down those next upcoming games later. But yeah, thank you so much for for listening. If you want to help out the show, you can leave us a rating on anywhere you listen to your podcast. You can follow me over at Twitter at Duke Blue Central. Would love to interact with some of you there. And thank you so much. Be back soon. Go to Blue Devils.